terms of that, I just shared a video from, I think it was the No Chill podcast with Gilbert Arenas, where he talked about SVG would play and shoot around with players and joke around. But then when a countdown clock that they had in the gym would hit 0 to start practice, he flipped a switch and went absolutely insane. And I'm sure that that kind of correlates with his focus on accountability and focus on defense is part of who he is. Have you heard any stories about that as a Magic expert, as a guy who's covered the Magic?
So, I mean, nothing, comes to mind immediately, like no specific examples, but his protege, Steve Clifford, current Magic coach, shares a lot of those same principles. And he's one of those guys that I think, with the exception of Dwight Howard, has had nothing but glowing responses to, his character and his work ethic as a coach, so on and so forth. And, there was a period of time when Dwight and Stan were actually on really good terms. And Stan has this, I don't know how to, almost like a cat in heat. When he's angry, his voice sounds like a cat in heat. And Dwight used to do a really terrible impersonation of it. But going back, watching like how the players would poke fun at the coach, and the coach would take it in stride, and, kind of seeing some of the antics during pregame, like Stan allowed his guys to have fun. Like I think it was 09-10 that season. We had Jay Will, we had Vince Carter, so on and so forth. And during the pregame, like layups and warm-ups and whatnot, towards the last couple of minutes, they would have dunk-offs. And they would all goof around. It was just absurd. But the fans loved it. And Jay Will, probably like 37 at this point in time, maybe 38. Obviously, he could not dunk. So Dwight would stand underneath the rim. Jay Will would run, and then Dwight would pick him up and like toss him, help him dunk. And like little things like that, I think people underestimate. Like they think, oh, Stan's a hard ass. He's overly strict. He doesn't know how to relate to players, so on and so forth. But if that was the case, those kind of antics aren't happening. I think when you're winning, and he's, proud of your performance, and he thinks you guys are doing the right thing as professional basketball players, he'll allow wiggle room, and not to sound like he's some sort of dictator, but, he's not going to get on your ass for having fun. That was a common theme in those late 2000s Magic teams. They were a fun team. They got along. They liked to joke. And they were able to do so because they were winning games. I think Stan will hold you guys accountable. He'll hold players accountable. And, it's all fun and games until you start losing, And I think he's the kind of coach that can navigate and manage the egos of the players in that regard. Because, when you're losing, your egos are drifting up, they're drifting down. It's easy. And I think, you cover the Pelicans, you've seen it. When the going gets tough, it gets really tough, So I think he's the type of coach who can kind of keep those things, in place, make sure the players are happy, they're having fun, that they're communicating. At the end of the day, it's a damn game. It's not life or death, but they are professional athletes. They get paid to do, what they do at a high level. And I think he'll hold them accountable.
So you referenced it there, Jonathan, about his potential. I mean, the narrative has been from certain pundits and certain networks, his potential inability to relate to younger players. I mean, where do you think that comes from? I mean, you just said it. You think it's basically irrelevant. It's not true. I mean, Kendrick Perkins said it, so I have no reason to believe it. He also believed that Jason Kidd or Mark Jackson was a better hire in this situation, which I don't know a single person that would agree with that. Where do you think that narrative comes from, his potential inability to relate to players?
Shaq. It comes from Shaq. I think it's part of the reason why, if not the biggest reason why, the Miami Heat fired him the year they won the championship. I think they were 11-10 at the time, one game over 500. They weren't performing particularly great, and Stan got the axe because of it. And what came out after that was a lot of Shaq talking about how Stan couldn't relate to the players, so on and so forth. And then, of course, when Dwight wanted to be traded, have you seen that press conference?
I just watched it. Yeah.
Yeah. First of all, that's my favorite thing. I can quote that, it's 12 o'clock now. If they fire me now, I'll go home. I'll have a nice day. Like, that's who Stan is. So that kind of, I guess, hostility between coach and player, star player, that he's known for, I think part of that is because he, unlike most coaches, he's not going to let things slide. If you miss a defensive assignment as, superstar center Dwight Howard or superstar center Shaquille O'Neal, he's going to hold you accountable the same way he would the fourth guy off the bench. He doesn't show favorites. He doesn't let it slide. Like, if anything, he asks more of his star players than he does of his role players. And I think when you're a multimillionaire superstar, you expect everyone to love you. Obviously, not every star player is like that, but I think there are. I think Shaq is one of them. I think Dwight is another one of them. And I think the fallout, in hindsight, definitely falls on the star, specifically Dwight Howard, not Shaq, and not Shaq. And Van Gundy got the blame for it early on, and I think it interfered with some of the coaching opportunities he got. If you look at his time in Detroit, obviously they underachieved, but there was no narrative about him not being able to relate to the younger players. There was narrative about him being a terrible executive, which he probably very well was. His team's underachieved. But look at Andre Drummond. He had some of his best years under Van Gundy. He had, huge numbers. He was an all-star under Van Gundy. So what does that tell you? I think he has a knack for being able to relate and develop younger guys. Drummond had his best years. You had Dwight Howard blossom into a potential future Hall of Famer. Jameer Nelson had his lone all-star year under Van Gundy. Redick credits him. Marcin Gortat credits him. Hedo Turkoglu credits him. The list goes on and on.
Absolutely. And I've heard this narrative from people like Kendrick, forgive me, who does the show Uninterrupted? Skip Bayless. So
yeah, a bunch of idiots.
Exactly. Two guys that I do not necessarily listen to on a frequent basis for good reason. So I'd like to think that narrative is unnecessary. I think it comes from the fact that he didn't play basketball too. I mean, at least at that high level. Mm-hmm.